Pod SaaS, where we're putting the SaaS back in SaaSy. Sponsored by Leader Pro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pod SaaS. I am your host, Chris Sheng, and today we have Sheila coming to us from Chicago on behalf of Gray Matter Analytics. How's it going, Sheila?
It's going great. How about you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Super excited. So why don't you tell us just, before we dive into your journey, but what is Gray Matter Analytics? Who makes a good customer for you guys?
Yes, Gray Matter Analytics is a software as a service company focused in health providers, meaning hospital systems, as well as health plans. Our core capability is around managing what's called in the industry value-based care contracts, which is risk. Medicaid, Medicare, and commercial plans that have risk components to their contracts with hospital systems. Profile of a great customer: health system that's anywhere from $3 to billion or higher, or a health plan or a managed care organization that is in that 2 billion or higher range.
Got it. Awesome. I'm curious as to, I know the company has been around now almost a decade, and so want to get a better understanding of your background and how you ended up starting that. But before we do so, we have a series of rapid fire questions that we like to get through just so we can get to know you a little bit better. Nothing too crazy, but if you're up for it, we can jump right in.
Let's go.
Sounds good. First question is super straightforward, but do you have a favorite entrepreneur and or startup story? It could be one of the same or two separate.
I really don't. I think most entrepreneurs and startup stories are very similar, meaning that I feel that most of us think that things are going to happen much faster than what they actually do, as well as, to be an entrepreneur, you always have a dream and a vision. And most of us, the glass is always half full. So I really don't have a favorite story. So sorry on that question.
No problem. Not at all. Do you have a favorite entrepreneur that you look at? It could be even like a personal mentor or an advisor.
There's been a number of them out in Silicon Valley. I spent a lot of time out there. Some of them have sold out and cashed out. Shelley Archambault, I think she didn't found the company, but she managed and operated that company for a number of years. And I think she did a great job of capital raising, as well as taking the company to the next level. I often admire more so the women entrepreneurs, just because, it's harder for women to raise capital, and most customers don't expect women to be the founders and entrepreneurs. So
interesting.
I would say one other one is Yvonne Wassenaar. She didn't found Puppet, but she came in as the professional management there. And I think she did a great job there too as well.
Awesome. Those are two great ones. Next question is, do you remember what you wanted to be as a kid back when you're maybe 8, 9, 10 years old?
I do. I wanted to be a model, actually.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of that is tied to what what you see. And at the time when I was at that age, women were either teachers or they were nurses, but not so much in business. After a while, though, as I matured, I decided being a model was not what I wanted to do, because it was too much tied to vanity. And I wanted what I did to be tied to my intellect.
Got it. Cool. Next question is most painful experience, and I'll give a little bit of context to that. I think the most exponential periods of growth, whether personal or professional, tends to stem from places of extreme discomfort. So knowing that, has there been any examples, again, this could be personal or professional, of a painful experience that obviously while you're going through it was super trying or difficult or challenging, but in hindsight may have been character defining for you?
Yeah, I spent about 1.5 years working in China. And for the most part, my experience there was wonderful. But the first, I'd say, 4 to 6 months were very difficult. It was difficult learning how to manage people from a different culture. It was difficult in also because I was in a matrix environment when I was there, and everybody thought that they were in charge, including me. So, so it was really difficult. But hindsight, I am so glad I did that. I grew a lot. I learned to manage different culture environments, made a lot of great friends over in China. So definitely glad that I did it. But there were lots of days that I just didn't know what to do relative to trying to motivate the team and getting the team aligned.
Got it. Got it. Next question here, somewhat relates to the painful experience, but obviously when you start a business, whether it's gray matter almost a decade ago, it's always very trying to kind of get something off the ground, especially from the ideation phase. So is there anything that particularly motivates you in the 25th hour when your back is against the wall to kind of like fight your way out of that corner?
Oh, absolutely, because I'm not a quitter. And I know that the product and the services that we deliver to the market are much needed. And I know that all I've got to do is get my fair share of the market share. And so, I get motivated every day. And then the other thing I would say is I have customers, I have employees, and I have shareholders that are all expecting me to deliver and execute. So that also motivates me.
The level of like responsibility and accountability makes sense. Obviously, being a CEO, it can be very stressful. As a founder, it can be very stressful. Is there anything particular that you personally go to decompress?
Oh, sure. I'm a very spiritual person. So my religion carries me a lot, as well as I love to exercise. So I exercise almost 6 days a week.
Got it. Two very good ones. Next question is, again, the idea of being a CEO or founder, wearing a lot of different hats, especially in the early days. Has there been a skill that you have picked up along the way in your career that you may not have necessarily thought you're going to pick up along the way, and you've had a strong emotional disposition towards, either loved or hated?
Well, I've always been an action-oriented person. And when you're an action-oriented person, sometimes you don't think through the decision as much as you should before you actually act. So I've picked up the skill to decompress, think about it, look at all the different angles before I act.
That's good. It's a good one. Next question is a little bit more personal, but it's the idea of a bucket list. And if you have one, number one, and then number two is, what's one of the more ambitious items that's on that bucket list, if you don't mind sharing?
Wow. I've had the good fortune of working and visiting 45 different countries. So I don't have a lot on my bucket list from a travel perspective. I have some personal accomplishments of things that I want to do to give back. And obviously, being a female African-American woman, there were a number of doors that were open to me by other people. And had those doors not been open, I wouldn't have accomplished what I have. So ambitious, no, because I feel like when you've been granted power, the way you should use that power is for others and not for yourself.
Great answer. Last question here, as we round things out, is the idea of legacy. But more importantly, what kind of impact do you want to leave on this earth before you leave it?
Well, I just said it earlier. I really would like to have people feel like, and obviously you can't touch everyone, but that I've helped them in some way and somehow accomplish their personal goals relative to their career goals or development and growth. One of the biggest satisfactions that I get in being the CEO is watching individuals grow as they learn and or emulate good management skills. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I think I'm pretty good at management.
Awesome. On that note, we're done with the rapid fire questions, but lots of good nuggets in there that I want to extrapolate on in terms of just getting to dive a little bit deeper. Now, you mentioned that you work in China for a year and a half. It seems like when I looked at your LinkedIn profile that you've worked corporate for a certain number of years as an early part of your first chapter of your career. And you've been on the board of some really big name companies. And I'm curious as to, what motivated you to then start Gray Matter Analytics, right? Like, seems like you're on this track of stability and security and consistency, and starting a business is not for the wary, and there's an incredible amount of risk associated to it, at the end of the day. So what was that mental journey like, first and foremost, and then we can dive into the logistics of it?
It really was around wanting to build. Even when I was inside of large corporations, I was always doing something entrepreneurial. I mentioned I worked in China. Basically that came about because I said, hey, I've done what you've asked me to do here. I'm kind of bored. What's next? So even though when I was in large companies, I always wanted to take on those roles that I felt would have a significant impact.
Got it. And how did you end up landing on the idea for Gray Matter?
Well, early in my career, I had been with a software company that built the early iterations of relational databases. Okay. The technology now is much better than what it was then. And it was kind of a perfect storm coming together, meaning the Affordable Care Act and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid actually making the decision to use data to change the payment models. And that said to me, healthcare had always been one of the laggards as far as technology adoption, and B, with the technologies getting better, and now you had a real business case. To me, those three together was the right impetus for me to jump in and create Gray Matter, and with the focus on analytics for payment models.
Got it. So now you had, I guess you found this, you sensed this opportunity. Then how do you go about the logistics part of it, which is now, did you have a team that you started this off with, or did you spearhead this on your own? Did you raise any capital to kind of get things off the ground, or was it bootstrapping it initially to kind of get to a place where you had some semblance of market fit? Can you walk us through a little bit of like those early days?
It was a combination of, I did not have a team initially, but I had the good fortune of having my own capital. So initially I used my own capital to hire a small team, and I was rolling up my sleeves, getting my hands real dirty. In fact, there were a lot of nights when I was thinking to myself, and why am I doing this? And when I say nights, I mean past midnight.
Yeah.
But so no, I was, and then, we were able to, because of the network that I have, to land a few large customers early on that really proved and validated the need for the application of analytics in new payment models. The challenge we had at the time was when I launched the company, it was right when the government had offered hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, for health systems to automate their electronic medical records. So they were busy getting the government's money for automation, and it was hard to get their attention around data.
I see. Staying in that time period, as you're building out this team and you're putting your own resources and capital into it, what were some of like the early proof points or validation points? Like you mentioned, some of these early customers or adopters. Were these conversations that you were having as you were building the product, or were you building first and then going back to the market, getting feedback from the market to see if it was where it needed to be? How were you making the iterations based off of that feedback loop? So
our first 5 years in business, we had no product because of, as I mentioned again, the Affordable Care Act and meaningful use. We couldn't get anyone's attention around analytics. So we decided to validate our ideas using consulting services around data analytics. And one of the things that has always been true in healthcare is most healthcare organizations have very messy data for a number of reasons. They have siloed solutions. They have a lot of data that is, the systems that use the data is not in their control. Some of the times that's lab applications, pharma applications. So when I started thinking about, how could we really get credibility was to understand and consult with healthcare organizations around what should be their data strategy, how should they be using data, and more importantly, how do they clean up their data? So we did a lot of data governance work at that time.
Got it. So like the first 5 years was primarily doing the data governance work and then figuring out from that experience, then how to build the product. Ultimately,
Right.
That makes a ton of sense. So, going back to that, when did you start thinking, all right, we've collected enough experience from the service side? Because the service side is obviously very difficult to scale, right? Like,
Right.
So the capital, the human capital required and trying to scale up human capital is very difficult. But that said, when did you make that decision where it's like, okay, I now know what we need to build. This is the direction of what we're going to build. Was that about 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah,
If so, okay.
It was actually 4.5 years ago.
Okay.
I looked at what was happening in the marketplace, meaning around value-based care early also, when you would go talk to a health system about risk, and they would say, oh, no, we don't do risk. We're fee for service. Well, today, everybody's got risk for one main reason, the demographics. If you do Medicare, you have risk, right? If you have Medicaid patients, you have risk. So now with the increase in labor costs, increase in material costs, the only way to improve your margins is to take on more risk, but be able to manage it effectively.
Got it. So again, taking a step back, but like at that 4.5 years ago mark, when you start deciding to put together the product, are you now working with specific companies that maybe came in through the consulting side of things to then take a product to market based off of what they're saying? Or was this more of like you're creating the wireframes and the product based off of just already the previous experiences?
Yeah, it was the latter. It was
us
creating the wireframes and solution architecture based on the previous experiences and what we were seeing in the market.
Okay. And then when did you start rolling that out to potentially new customers? How long ago did it take for you to get a product to like
We started
MVP?
rolling that out to new customers 2 years ago.
Got it. So about 2.5 years of development.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're still, and as you probably know, software is never done. So We're still developing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like now just catching things up, about 2 years ago is when you had a product live in the market. Where is the company at today in terms of like size, number of customers that you guys have? Just curious as to kind of like the scope of contrast from looking at that decade-long journey of learning for 5 years, building for 2.5, going to market, and then ultimately now I feel like probably at a point where you're ready to scale and grow.
Yeah, so actually our revenues had gotten what I would say from a startup in services quite high. And so when we made that decision to stop and start to build, obviously we took a step back from our revenue perspective. And then COVID happened.
Yep.
So if you're selling the health systems during those 2 years, but now we're on a great trajectory. We're, I can give you a range, but we're expecting this coming up year to be somewhere between 10 and 15 million in ARR.
Oh, wow. And for 2023?
Yeah.
Got it. That's pretty fast considering, you're just taking a product out for 2 years, right? So
yeah, and again, it's timing in the market. I mentioned COVID is a negative, but now it's also a positive because again, health systems when I first started building a product, they would tell you, oh, our IT department, they're going to build this for us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have time for that anymore.
Yep. Yeah. We've spoken to a few healthcare kind of like tech founders, as well as on the VC side of things. And that seems to be the overarching theme, which is that the pandemic helped expedite what has traditionally been a steeper tech learning curve to now prioritizing technologies as a ways to be preemptive more than reactive, as how they used to be. So it seems like it's definitely helped expedite the tech landscape as it services that industry specifically. Still, that being said, what would you say have obviously been some of the challenges? Because these are longer sales cycles, larger deal sizes, obviously, but there's a lot of with our experience in this space, and as well as talking to other founders, but there's a lot of different types of buyers involved in the decision-making process. So how have you guys looked to tackle some of those types of things?
Well, I would say we've had some success and we've had some challenges. And the big success that we've had is being able to get our foot in the door and get some pilots off the ground. This coming up year, we've got a very aggressive target for pilots. We're looking to do between 13, 15 pilots. Wow. Our conversion rate is pretty high, but as you mentioned, there's a lot of turnover in health systems and in health plans. The sponsor you had is now gone somewhere else. So one of the things that we're really focused on as a company right now is making sure that we perfect a solid account management plan. Even though it's software, you can't assume that every user is going to adopt the product. And even if most of them do, because of the turnover, the new ones coming in, sometimes there's not a transition of this is how we use this solution to help, improve our overall quality and or cost of care. So we're really focused on account management right now.
Got it. Okay. And what would you say, if you're to go back maybe like 10 years when you first started down this journey, what advice would you kind of give to yourself? Good advice, bad advice, or like the pros, the cons of what you've learned to date. What would you have given advice to yourself about 10 years ago when you first embarked on this journey?
My team always hear me say, go faster. And instead, 10 years ago, I would have said, go faster, 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 faster. I over my career, I've managed a lot of software engineers and developers. And obviously in that skill set, there's a level of perfection. And I often say to the team, just get it 70% right. If we have to go back and refine to get the other 15 to 20%, you're never going to be 100%. What's really important is to capture market share fast and get your foot in the door and then perfect once you get in.
That's good advice. And then can you share with me, you managed obviously a lot of technical teams at this point, you said, but is that something that you had to learn along the way, or did you have a technical background, early on?
So many, many years ago, I had written software, but I don't consider myself as a technical person. And that is something that I've had to learn. I can actually remember one of my roles at Ernst & Young, I actually brought in an external resource to just look at how better could I communicate with my team. And I'll give you one example. When this individual came in and worked with me and my engineers around communication, some people communicate, meaning myself, when I talk, I process. Engineers are very precise people, and they said that they thought when I was talking to them, I have made a decision. Since I was still processing of what are some of the factors that we should be taking into consideration. So One is very more gray, meaning my style of communication, versus oftentimes software engineers is much more black and white.
Yeah, very binary way of thinking, which I think that's one of the things that I've had to learn too, as a non-technical founder is that it's easy to say faster, 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 and then when you sit down with a technical person, they're like, well, if we go really fast, this is what could possibly happen if we don't, right? They're usually the ones that put the brakes on on things when you want to go fast. Awesome. That said, what would you say is some of the things that you've learned in the past 10 years? As you've seen this business grow and evolve, maybe some of the stronger takeaways that you would like to share with maybe other founders or entrepreneurs that are going through a similar journey where, again, I think like it's hardest to kind of get over those first 2, 3, 4 year humps. And then you start having some semblance of like, I really understand this market, and you have the confidence to go out and then build the tools that that the market needs. But to get to that point, and it takes patience, obviously, but it also takes persistence, where many might just give up within those early days because it's very easy to, and it's the most challenging times. But what has kind of like kept you going, and what advice would you give other entrepreneurs in that sense?
So this is not advice that I've learned over the last 10 years. I've learned this many years ago, but I always remind myself when I'm looking to hire talent. And I put at the top of the evaluation for talent is motivation. I, over the course of my career, have had some very smart people work for me, but not highly motivated. And if you're really smart and you're not highly motivated, you don't get to share and apply that knowledge to what we're trying to do in the company. And so I'd rather hire someone that I would say got average intelligence, but highly motivated, versus someone that is really smart, but not highly motivated.
That's a good one too. I definitely steer the course of the latter as well, just because, you can't find some of those soft skill sets or the intangibles of a character.
Right.
You can't train them, I guess is what it is. Awesome. Last question here as we kind of like round out the half hour mark, but is the idea of, where do you see the company in the next 5 years? And is the company's overarching mission and vision something that you're aligned with to kind of take it all the way through to what you potentially think it could be, whether that is becoming a public company or some kind of exit or acquisition? Like, what do you imagine, that outcome to look like? And then, where do you see the company in the next 5 years from now?
So I back to the last question you asked. So one thing I have learned is there are plans and thoughts that you can have, but the macro environment, business environment, really dictates that. So I spend a lot of time paying attention to what's going on around me. And historically, that in a newer technology environment like value-based care, SaaS, there's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of players. Over the course and the maturity of the market, there's consolidation. And you have to decide, do you have the team to take it to the next level? Or do you also have the drive and will to do it yourself? Or do you go out and hire someone to be your successor? But it's really hard to make those decisions until you see how the tea leaves are starting to play out. I believe if you focus on building a great company, you have all of those options available to you.
Absolutely. So your focus is on just continue to realize the maximum potential of the team that you have in place, and then also just the product of what you have.
Right.
Got it. On that note, I think it was great to really kind of get to know you and your journey and how you ended up starting Gray Matter Analytics and kind of what it's evolved into today. It wasn't a SaaS product out the gate, but it was something that you learned to figure out how to build a SaaS product. And I guess one more question before we sign off here would be, was it always the intent when you first started the business 10 years ago to build a scalable SaaS solution? Or was that something, it was always that, right? Okay.
It's always that, but integrating a level of services with it also, because health systems in particular are very short on talent. And it's just not possible that you can drop a product at the door and walk away and you think it's going to have longevity and stick. So I wanted to integrate services. So our business is roughly 70% product, or maybe 75 now, and 25% still is services that's integrated into delivering the product, and more importantly, making sure we have customer success.
Got it. And that 25%, is that kind of like what you would call like implementation, onboarding kind of revenue?
That, and also on the front end, we do what we call pilots.
Got it.
And actually showing the customer with a subset of their data, running some models, exactly how the solution can deliver value.
Got it. Okay. So you guys charge for those pilots, and then that's how you ultimately convert to customers. Got it. Cool. Awesome. Well, on that note, thanks for providing that clarification. But on that note, I just want to say thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm sure you're super busy, but it was great to get to know you, great to get to know your business and all that you've been able to accomplish to date.
Thank you so much, and my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you.